All right, so this is now the third time that I'm recording this because my computer, for some reason, didn't let me save it. But my TED Talk is titled The Secret of Self-Control by Jonathan Bricker. And it starts off with him telling a story about his mom, who at age 42, out of nowhere, started to exercise. She started to walk around the block. She started to change her behaviors in regards of what she was eating. She started eating healthier, and she did all of this out of nowhere. And he was very impacted by this because it showed an incredible amount of self-discipline. He later mentions that she ended up actually attempting to climb Mount Everest. I don't remember if he said that she did it or not, but that she did try to do it, which is very important. And he goes on to mention afterwards the epidemic of unhealthy living, referring to America and the way we kind of oversaturate our brains with things that are very stimulating and distract us, which is a common theme nowadays. He mentions that billions of people smoke and are obese throughout the world, and these are two issues that are preventable. And he suggests that these are problems of willingness, and willingness is a word that he describes as allowing cravings to come and go. So he was basically saying that people in general just have an issue with this, but there is a couple of ways that you can kind of deal with this and make peace with your cravings. And he mentions that there is this thing called willingness training that some workplaces have adapted, as well as rehabilitation centers, which is a kind of way of combating your cravings, whether it's drugs or unhealthy food or just unhealthy habits in general. He mentions one example that really stood out to me, and in this example he kind of described like the main key of the whole TED Talk, which is that there was a woman in her mid-40s who had smoked her whole life, and she was trying to quit. So she joined this program that Jonathan Bricker had made up, and it was basically a psychological training to help you fight your addictions. And in this case, it was cigarettes. So he told her to keep track of every time she had a craving for a cigarette and just write it down on a piece of paper. And then she came back to him and told him that this didn't really help, but now I've logged how many times I've decided, or how many times I wanted to have a cigarette. And then he said to her, well, every time now that you have this thought, I want you to think of it as, I am having the thought that I want a cigarette. And then he took it one step further and said, you should try and look at it as, I am noticing that I'm having the thought that I want a cigarette. So in other words, he was basically telling her to look at the issue from a third person perspective, and this would kind of allow you to, it would basically just make it easier to deal with the craving. It may make it easier to kind of overcome it, because instead of looking at it as, oh, you want this thing, you're looking at it as, oh, my brain, a part of me is telling me that I want this thing. And in doing so, you kind of remove yourself from the situation and can give yourself a little bit more time to process, and therefore making it a bit easier to overcome the cravings.